This demo is on creating and modifying patterns. You can apply a pattern to geometric shapes or to a shape drawn with the pen tool. Simply draw a shape and locate the pattern in the swatch palette, and then we'll apply it to your fill. Okay, these are pre-existing patterns. Now there are more patterns in the swatch library. If you go into the little swatch library menu, down to patterns, and they'll come up. Every time you apply one, it will add it to your swatch palette. Okay, now to understand how a pattern works, we're going to pull it apart. So I'm going to delete this and take this pattern, and it's out of here, and we can drag it right into our page. And it puts that pattern there, and we can modify it from here. Now, if we hit Command Y, preview selection, take our direct selection tool and deselect. Now I'm going to select this rectangle in the center. Okay, if we look at our fill and stroke, it has a fill and stroke of none. This is an invisible rectangle that is sent behind the artwork to crop the pattern. So everything outside of this rectangle will now be cropped off, and the pattern will continue. Okay, so that's how that works. You have this invisible rectangle. Now I'm going to modify that. If I take my direct selection tool and select it, and I'm going to delete that invisible rectangle. Now I'm going to select and drag this back into the swatch palette. Okay, and now we'll look at it without that invisible rectangle. See, it's giving us white spaces. So when we have that rectangle to crop it, we get this, a continuous pattern. It'll just go on. But without it, we get this. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and create our own rectangle using geometric shapes. I'm just going to draw a square. Just throw a solid color on that. So I basically got a square, a circle, and a star. I'm just going to create a pattern out of this. Okay. Now the trick with a pattern is not seeing any white space around it. So first I'm going to do it the wrong way so you can see, understand it better. So I'll select all three shapes and drag them into the swatch palette. Now I will draw a rectangle and apply the pattern to it. And you can see it's giving us these white around it because we're not cropping it. So we need to crop that pattern. So I'm just going to drag it right back out onto the page. And this time I'm going to apply that invisible rectangle. So I'll get my rectangle tool, give it a fill and stroke of none. And I don't want to see any white space. So I'm just going to drag it like this. And then I'm going to send that to the back. Object, arrange, send to back. Now it's behind it. Now it should crop everything outside of that rectangle. So now we select them all and drag it into the swatches. Now we do a new rectangle, and our new one, you can see we have no spaces. It continues on and on. So here it is without the invisible rectangle, and here it is with the invisible rectangle. So you have all these swatches in your library you can pick from. And every time you use them, it will apply them into your swatch palette. Now, an example of how you might use a pattern in a tech illustration. An M16A2 service rifle here that the student did, and there's a pattern on this pistol grip. So we need to really zoom in on it to see it. So we can definitely see a pattern there. So if we look in our swatch palette, here's our pattern. Now, since he wanted so many of them, this is very small. I'll drag it out onto the page. Try that again. Look at my layers. Need to unlock those layers. So there it is. You can see how tiny it is. But if we zoom in, it's simply 3 circles. Get our direct selection tool here. And there's our rectangle with a fill and stroke of none sent to the back. And that's creating that pattern. So that's how you create a pattern and how you can modify it.